All right, so something happened over the weekend here in Atlanta, which is there was a shooting at Atlantic Station, which is like a mid-scale like shopping area that sometimes is a hangout for young people. And from what I understand about the shooting, it was sadly your typical confrontation between a bunch of young people, a bunch of young black boys, and via that confrontation, a 12-year-old boy was shot and killed. Several people were shot, but he was the only one that lost his life, which is sad in and of itself. But the aftermath of it, I really wanted to speak on because the aftermath of this situation is emblematic of a lot of issues that not enough people understand about the challenges black people face. So I won't play this video, but they did they did the usual visual for the young boy, and his mother spoke. And the thing, if in my day, and still today, when you hear something tragic like this happens, people say shit like, well, where were the parents? Because this is a shooting that happened at 11, 12 o'clock at night. And the boy was 12 years old. So you have to ask yourself, he was with a whole bunch of other boys. It was a bunch of boys that got into an altercation with a bunch of other boys. So it makes sense to ask yourself initially, what was a 12-year-old boy doing out at night in a situation where he can get into an altercation where guns could be involved, right? It wasn't a mass shooting. That's the trick of the devil. I saw somebody try to post some shit like that, fucking with Lil Bill, because they try to call when there's like a gang related shooting. They try to call those mass shootings to skew the data on like who the real mass shooters are. But that's I don't even want to get into that. I talked about that in the first Manosphere video if you want to like hear about it. But no, it wasn't a mass shooting in the way that we think about it. It was just a shooting incident between it was street crime. It was street crime. But yeah, so people tend to ask and they say, well, where were the parents? Why was this 12-year-old boy out and about with a group of friends or whatever? And what should we do about it? And so the where were the parents statement is always a problem because it hinges on this idea that black parents just aren't trying. That it was just, some derelict mother letting her kids just run wild and not caring and not trying, etc. And it really just misunderstands the nature of what happens to some of these boys, especially considering what the mother had to say. I don't want to play her video because it just feels exploitative from my perspective. But she talked about how she tried very hard to get her son away from the path he was on. She is a single mother. She had, I think she said 4 kids. And her son had shown mental health issues, had shown behavioral issues, and had been trouble for most of his life. She even went as far as trying to call the police on her son, hoping that maybe if the police would lock him up and do something about his behavior, that authority he would respond to get him, to give him a taste of what could happen if he kept messing up. And she said that the court systems refused to intervene, which I understand and overall agree with, right? And she talked about, like somebody said, like hard to try when you need 3 jobs. Like, so I've mentioned this before, like I've worked in the juvenile justice system in Atlanta. And the main thing you need to understand, which is, a big part of my political growth in the last few years, is that these systems are simply not designed to truly help people. They're just not. The system is designed to protect the system. That is its real core function, is to keep the state from being sued because of the misbehavior and, you know, possible crime or victimizations of children. In Atlanta in particular, the story, it's one of the things that changed the way Atlanta did things was there was like two boys that had been involved in and out the system in all these ways for years, and nobody did anything, and then they killed somebody, and it made, you know, it made like big news, and they said, okay, well, we need to revamp the system. And I might be misremembering that because that's like the story almost everywhere. And so the courts, the one thing they do that I believe is overall correct is they don't want to take power out of the family, out of the household. They don't want it to be possible for a mother to just send her child to jail for being bad. So like, and I've seen that, like I've seen mothers who have, you know, sons who are just misbehaving, who really need, you know, therapy and like greater communal support, which isn't always available. So I get why they end up in the court, but those children need support and they end up being systematized. They end up in the carceral state. You know, they end up with a criminal record or on probation. That mother saying, I called the police on my own son, that's not a good thing. But the fact that there was no useful support system for her son's delinquent behavior is the real bigger problem. And that exists because the courts are still built out of this carceral mentality. And the people, the community still has a carceral mentality, which is why I put up this story in particular. It's because of that carceral mentality that we're not oriented to say when we see kids getting in trouble and having issues early on, we don't want to engage that from a therapeutic standpoint. We don't want to engage that maybe even from a medicinal standpoint. We say that tough love and punishment is what will fix the problem with that kid. And so after this mother talks about, and it's so crazy, this mother like was on the news and on TikTok talking about, I tried everything I could. My son needed help. My son needed this, and I couldn't find it, and nothing worked. And I tried. She talks about how, and like one of the things that was so crazy to me when I was in the court system is like mothers, like a kid would get in trouble, right? But because of the way the system is designed, the mother would have to bring their kid to court on like a Tuesday morning. And so what does a single working mother have to not do to bring their child to court on a Tuesday morning? They have to not go to work. And if you have a delinquent child and you have a job, you basically got to pick one or the other, you know? So you're less likely to engage with the system if you can avoid it, because the system will require of these mothers things that are not possible, not without greater social support. And that's what happened to her. So what she really needed was like a social support system. So I just saw somebody's mentioned defund the police. So maybe we take, I don't know what Atlanta's police budget is, probably in the billions, even after having beef with Keisha last election. Maybe we take some of those billions of dollars out of the police system and we put it in the social services system to provide a more holistic wraparound services environment for these young people. Because I can tell you, when these kids get to the court, their support is being held together by spit and sticks and bubble gum. That's it. It is so dysfunctional. I had situations where I had kids that would have to be taken out their parents' house and would be moved between like 7 group homes in a matter of a couple of months. You know, and they're building a police training center in the forest. There's a forest in the south, like southeast Atlanta. Southeast Atlanta is like super underdeveloped. Like people think Atlanta's all like glitz and glamour and it's a big metropolitan city. Low key, it's not. Like the metropolitan area of Atlanta is really small. I'm sorry, the city center of Atlanta, the downtown area is really small. And then there's metropolitan areas like outside of Atlanta. And so like literally within a 10-minute drive from like downtown Atlanta, there are large swaths of unused forest areas. Like, I don't know what the rules are in Georgia, but like it's hard. Like we got trees everywhere. It's gorgeous. I love it. I hate that they're cutting down trees to build a facility to train police officers, but it is what it is. And so she goes and she expresses to the world, I needed more help. And some city council member proposes a curfew for young people. And it's so wrong-minded. But that is like, because we have this carceral tough love psychology within community. This is not just a Black thing. This is everybody thing, but I can only speak to what I've seen. And I've been a teacher, and I've been in the court system. I've been in the behavioral health system. And I've seen, like, I've written papers about, hey, maybe less focus on punishment, more focus on therapy for young people. The data's there. It is a well-known, well-understood thing within the public health community that punishing children for bad behavior, for that punishing drug addicts, etc., it does not help the situation at all. People still have that mentality that's what it takes, that bootstrap mentality, the same mentality. If you saw me talk about it in the Black Panther video, that got us the 94 crime bill. We like to characterize the 94 crime bill as this, thing that was done to us by Joe Biden and by, white liberals. And the reality was it was a team effort that everybody was in on that. You know what I'm saying? And still you have, a lot of Black folks, especially, older Black folks, on some what about Black on Black crime stuff, on some tough love, send them to jail, pull your pants up nonsense. We still have that because, yes, real talk, because the punishment is cathartic for the punisher. And remember, I said this because it's going to come back up in the video in the future. But let me just explain for y'all to know why a curfew does not work. First off, there's already a curfew for like 11 o'clock. It didn't help because it was 11, 12 o'clock when it happened. So what's going to happen if the curfew hits at 7 p.m.? The children that are going to be outside but after curfew are not going to say, oh, the curfew's lower, I guess I should go inside now. No, like that is not going to change the behavior of delinquent children. It's not going to change that. So what they're really going to end up doing is increasing the likelihood of children encountering law enforcement in the city. You're going to criminalize more children. And every time a Black child, a Black minor, a Black man encounters a police officer is an opportunity for brutality. You just raise the stakes of there just being another Rayshard Brooks and the countless other, young Black men and women that have died in the hands of police custody in the last couple of years. And so for the ones that are lucky to not get brutalized or murdered by the police, they're going to be systematized and criminalized to further raise the likelihood that they're going to repeat encounters with law enforcement. That will not help the situation. It will only create more problems, but it feels good. It feels good for certain folks, and this is why, I'll eventually get to the Black conservatism video, but that Black conservatism video will not spend a lot of time on Thomas Sowell and Candace Owens. They will never get their own full video because the real problem with Black conservatism is not Black Republicans. The problem with Black conservatism is this more than likely Democratic city council member who doesn't understand that providing more power to local law enforcement is not going to fix delinquency. I can't remember the term, but there's a term about how when it comes to addressing Black children, especially Black boys, it comes from I think it's called deficit And I talked about this in the video a little while ago when I was talking about why it's important for Black children to have Black schools. But it's like a deficit learning, deficit something policy, which is instead of thinking about the systemic nature of why Black children and Black boys end up where they are, they say what we really need to do is make the Black boys better by making them work harder and pull up their pants and cut their hair and all these other things that we've been doing since the fucking 80s, since the 70s. That shit has not changed. We have had a million public speakers, million different initiatives to put little boys in suits and shit. You know what I'm saying? We got a million all boys schools that preach that you know, the bootstrap politic. You know, Jay-Z putting Bitcoin in the hood, all that stuff. We got a million of those. Those are not efficient ways to address the problem. Those will help a handful of Black boys. They will help some. I'm not saying don't do that, but it should be that end. But the fact that when something like this happens, our reflex, or at least what hits the news, right? Because I know from experience, there are people in the community doing real actual work. But what hits the news is, you know, a new curfew, y'all. That'll fix it. And it doesn't, you know. But that is a ideological like mindset that is deeply rooted in not just like Black culture, but America as a whole. America started as a penal colony, right? Like the Pilgrims or whomever were sent here instead of going to jail. You know, that's a Western, you know, I'm sure somebody who's more involved in you know, Western philosophy will be able to explain like the origins of the carceral nature of our society. Shout out to Broy Deschanel. She just dropped a really good video on cancel culture that I'm definitely going to steal some ideas from in the future. So I want to just get at that one because like I'm definitely going to be sharing this like within community here in Atlanta when this video is done, because I'm tired of that shit. Porter says, as someone inside the justice system, it's so depressing because the only good thing you can say about it is that it's extremely good at making caveman logic look sophisticated, well-reasoned, and research policy. Yeah, like the types of conversations and arguments and challenges that I encountered within the juvenile court system are a big reason why I'm in front of y'all in front of this camera, because it was really tough, and everybody knows it. Not everybody like cares, but everybody in that building understood that we were failing these children at a fundamental systemic level, and there was nothing we can do about it because there was no money. So let's get away from anarcho-syndicalism for a second. Get away from any type of like high-minded, like you know, philosophically backed, you know, your Hegel, your you know, Marx, whomever you want to quote to say this is the ideal, you know, leftist socialist society. Like, get away from all that for a second. We're talking about people that need tangible help now. These systems don't have any money. They don't have the money to hire people, to pay those people well, so that they will do their jobs, a very hard job, effectively, and have access to resources that actually help these children. They just scrape together whatever they could. And that's one of the first places cut. When it's time to cut budget, statewide, nationwide, federal, or local, the first place they cut is social services. And they say, figure it out on a lesser budget. Yeah, and the decent workers, you can't keep good social workers. You just cannot. They will either leave or lose their minds. They will either leave or end up like homegirl who was calling black men ashy and whatnot, who was right in her ethos, but wrong in her presentation. And that's kind of what happens if you've been in that environment for so long. You get so frustrated and callous that you'll say shit that isn't helpful to the problem. You know? So Yeah. Yeah.